but pass after death from one body to another, and they hold that by this teaching men are much encouraged to valor, through disregarding the fear of death. The most important Celtic crop festival was Samhain, or November Eve, at which time the worlds of the living and dead were permitted to mingle. At harvest time, sacrifices to pagan gods were made to assure passage through the winter. With the coming of Christianity to Ireland by way of St. Patrick and other missionaries beginning in the 5th century A.D., pagan holidays began to blur with Christian, and in the 9th century, the better to encourage conversion, Pope Gregory's calendar realigned church holidays to coincide with the old pagan festivals. Christmas was moved from the spring to coincide with the Roman festival of Saturnalia, and the Feast of All Saints now fell on November 1st, encouraging an alternate kind of communion with the dead to compete with Samhain, which was never completely suppressed and survives to the present day as Halloween. Irish folklore was not at all diminished by Christian teaching, from which it often drew a good deal of inspiration. Old pagan gods were transmogrified into a delirious variety of fairy folk, while the Christian god and the devil not infrequently made sideline appearances. The Catholic Church made no real effort to discourage Irish folk beliefs, and the populace evidenced no inability to balance two supernatural belief systems. The resulting oral tradition became one of the most richly textured in the world. Catholic monasteries in Ireland introduced the Roman alphabet and kept alive literacy and scholarship throughout the Dark Ages. Some have gone as far as saying they saved civilization, and their transcription and preservation of Irish sagas and legends, as well as the production of extraordinary illuminated Latin Gospels like the Book of Kells, circa 800, speaks to a profound love of language often regarded as the wellspring of a bottomless Irish capacity for storytelling. No other country of Ireland's size has made such an enormous contribution to world literature, and no other can boast of 4 Nobel Prize-winning writers, all in the 20th century: W.B. Yeats, George Bernard Shaw, Samuel Beckett, and Seamus Heaney. The achievements of the medieval scribes is all the more impressive in that it overlapped with more than 100 years of Viking raids beginning in the early 9th century, in which monasteries were regularly sacked. Before they were absorbed into Irish society, the Vikings built settlements that would evolve into major cities, especially Dublin, Wexford, Limerick, and Cork. The Irish language, like Scottish and Manx, is Celtic/Gaelic, descending from the same Indo-European roots. Middle English was introduced to Ireland in the 12th century, but no form of English predominated in Ireland until the 19th century, and then only after centuries of English/Irish political and religious strife. 7 centuries of Norman and English rule began in 1169, when mercenaries invaded the island. The English Reformation set off a brutal period of Catholic suppression, including the confiscation of land and wholesale massacres. By the end of the 18th century, 95% of Irish land was owned by Protestants. By the 19th century, Dublin, Ireland was one of Britain's largest cities and centres of trade, sometimes called the second city of the British Empire. Its intractable problems with overcrowding, squalor, and disease were equally oversized, and, in fact, among the worst in Europe. Death was a living presence, even if that grim vitality was expressed indirectly, through the sullen exertion of gravediggers, the unceasing procession of mourners, and the incessant writhing of worms. On October 8, 1847, a letter from the local cleric Richard Ardell was published in the Dublin Evening Mail, addressing a perceived central issue. The evil to be remedied, which I think demands the serious attention of the government and of every person, is the practice that now prevails of having burial in churchyards within the city, surrounded as they are by neighborhoods densely populated, the inhabitants of which are constantly inhaling an atmosphere noxious in its character and effect. Ardell continued with some direct observations. I have attended funerals where the remains of 7 bodies were exhumed to make room for an 8th about to be interred.